Sometimes kids can get stuck in having what we call a negative identity. Like they think, I'm dumb, or I'm stupid, or I'm not very kind, or I'm the aggressive kid, or I'm mean, or whatever it is. But they can see themselves as that, and then they just think that's who they are. I want to tell you a little story. It's a personal story about an experience that I had with one of my children that really shifted who I became as a parent and my understanding of how we can support our kids to have a more positive identity, to sort of identify with themselves differently. So I want to start by saying that I'm biased, of course. I don't know how we're not biased about our own kids. My eldest son, I have 3 kids, but my eldest son is 31. He's the head of a middle school in Europe. He's just a peaceful, fun-loving, really awesome a guy. Again, I'm biased. I'm his mom. But I just want to start by saying that. Now I'm going to step back 26 years, and my son was 5 years old. I was living in Ottawa at the time, and I was going for a walk with my son and his younger sister. It was a beautiful snowy day. It had just snowed. And my son and I and his sister were going for a walk, and a family had built a beautiful snowman on their front lawn. This big, beautiful snowman. And my son, who goes up to that snowman, and he takes both hands and he very aggressively pushes the head off of the snowman. Just snowman topples over. The woman who lived there, of the house, she opens the door and she just starts screaming at us. What is wrong with your kid? My daughters and I spent all morning building that snowman. We were just on the sofa looking out the window at our snowman when your son destroyed it. Like, get your kid some help. Like, what is wrong with him? Now, this was a hard moment for me. I took a deep breath. My son was filled with aggression at that time. We know that the emotion that drives aggression is frustration. My son's being was flooded with frustration during this period of time. I had just separated from my kid's dad. Everything about my son's world that he knew kind of had flipped upside down. The family configuration as he had known it was all different. The house he had always lived in, we had just moved out of. His little being was flooded with frustration, and he had not yet adapted. So attacking energy was sort of like poof, coming out of his system, left, right, and center. Now, I'm not very proud of it, but at that time, I started to parent from this place of fear in my stomach. I was thinking, I am not going to have a bad kid. I am not going to have a bad kid. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen. And I started to, be on like a hawk on Thomas. Thomas, use your words, not your hands. Thomas, when you go to school today, do not pull kids' toques off. Thomas, when you're with your sister, do not do this. Thomas, do not raise your voice. Thomas, 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 Thomas. Now, I was not using separation-based discipline, like timeouts, which we know increases alarm and challenging behaviors long-term. I wasn't even really yelling at my kid. Sometimes, if I'm being honest, I was raising my voice. But more often than not, I was just on him like a hawk, 24/7, Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. And his aggressive behaviors just whoosh, through the roof. Now, this was a challenging period during my life. I don't think anybody hopes and dreams for a separation. It was hard. And I spent many of my evenings journaling and just thinking, how am I going to raise these beautiful humans? How am I going to raise them to discover their best selves? And what am I not seeing here? I spent a lot of nights writing about Thomas, and what am I not seeing here? I'm trying so hard. And one night as I was writing, it struck me just hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh my gosh, Hannah, this is you. You are basically speaking to your child all day about how aggressive he is. Before he's even aggressive, you're saying, well, I know you're going to be aggressive when you go to school. So when you go to school, don't do this. Or I know when you go to the park, don't do this. Or when you're with your sister, don't do this. You are cementing this child's identity as an aggressive kid. Because here's the thing. Children form their identities in part by the reflection they see in their attachment's eyes. So how it works is it's not like they become who we are. They see in our eyes who we think they are. And I definitely was seeing my son as aggressive. So he was seeing in my eyes that I saw he was aggressive. And therefore he was starting to lean into that and form his identity as I'm an aggressive kid. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I need to change this up like right now. Like I kind of felt ill actually. Like I got to change this. So that night I made a decision that I was going to imagine the most incredible adult man I could. And the next day when Thomas got up, from now on, I was going to be like, okay, every single time Thomas is difficult, I'm going to imagine that this is who he's going to become. And I'm going to treat him as if he is already that wonderful, beautiful person. I'm going to stop parenting from a place of fear. And so the next day when Thomas got up, I would be completely lying if I told you what I remembered what he did, because it was 26 years ago and I have no idea. But whatever he did, let's say he pushed another snowman's head off, which it wasn't that, but I don't know what it was. Instead of the lecture I would normally give him, Thomas, that's not kind, that's not respectful, blah, 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 which never worked anyways. I stopped and I spoke to the part of him I wished him to identify with and grow in him. I'd say something along the lines of, Thomas, I see what a caring heart you have. You are such a kind and loving person. You had so much frustration inside of you and it just blew up over and came right out. But we're going to get there. You are such a loving and kind person, Thomas. Your frustration was just really big today. And you were feeling, whatever it was, I'd make room for that feeling. And I think Thomas, in feeling both the welcoming of the wholeness of who he was, the welcoming of his sad feelings, the welcoming of his frustration feelings, and also me seeing his goodness so he could see it in my eyes. Thomas adapted in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks. It kind of freaked me out, actually. I was like, oh my goodness, the power we have as leaders of our children in making room for their feelings of frustration and making room for their sadness and making room and saying, this is so hard. This is not what you wanted. Instead of just saying, stop it, cut it out. And speaking to the goodness. And here's the thing, it's so hard, but no baby is born bad. Somewhere along the line, sometimes our kids get stuck and it starts to look like personality. And so their behavior just starts to become challenging. And then it comes out of like a chicken and the egg scenario. And we just keep talking to them about that's who they are. And it kind of goes around in circles, which means that we as the parents sometimes have to go first to change the dance. We have to see their goodness sometimes before they show it to us. We have to see their kindness before they know they have it. We have to see their leadership capacity before they show it to us, instead of saying, oh, well, when you show me that you can be a leader, I'll give you some leadership opportunities. No, we have to flip it around. We have to be practitioners of seeing what is not yet there in order for them to discover it. So here's the thing. I look at my son now and sometimes I kind of think, wow, what if I had led him to know himself otherwise? We have a gift at this. And it's a weight as well as a parent in terms of how we help our kids to see themselves. And sometimes our stuck behavior looks like personality. But if we can remember that it's not personality, sometimes it's just stuck behavior. And we can help unstick it by practicing seeing what is not yet there and speaking that aloud to our children. I see your kindness. I see your goodness. Yeah, you had a hard day, or yes, your frustration blew up, but I see your loving heart. It's amazing what we can do in order to affect change. And so I just want to share that journey with you and say it's never too late. It's never too late to start to make these changes.